I'm here in Orlando, Florida for the Natty Narwhal Cycle, Ubuntu 11.04, and I'm talking to Mark Shuttleworth, founder of Ubuntu. Mark, you recently announced Unity on the desktop for 11.04. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure, Amber. Hi. So that was our most significant commitment. It's a substantial, it's the sort of on the back of a substantial amount of research and a fair amount of caucusing with our partners. It's also, recognizably and understandably a controversial move. We didn't seek to be controversial, but we completely understand why people are going to want to understand what our motivations are and want to understand what we see as the trajectory. Probably the most important thing for us to say, and I did address this when we made the announcement, was that we see this as a shell difference rather than a platform difference. Unity on the desktop will be a GNOME environment. We will promote GNOME applications. We'll promote the values of GNOME. And while we know we're pushing the limits and we know we're pushing people a little bit past where they're comfortable, we feel very confident that GNOME is benefiting from both the level of investment and the sort of experience that we're able to create around the applications that fundamentally define GNOME. The relationship doesn't look any different. I think Stormy's post was very lucid, very clearly expressed position. We have a very large number of developers who participate in GNOME. We also participate in the GNOME Foundation board. We support GNOME financially. We support GNOME with infrastructure, and have no desire or interest in doing anything else. We think GNOME should be an open ecosystem because open ecosystems generally thrive and attract ideas faster and more effectively than closed ecosystems. And so there are some things that we're working on, where we're essentially leading some of that thinking. But we want to be doing that under the broad umbrella of GNOME. There have been some suggestions that Ubuntu is not a GNOME desktop, and we feel very bad about those suggestions because we spend quite a lot of time and effort trying to do things in a way which does reflect, in our view, the values of GNOME. We have, broadly speaking, we have really great relationships with GNOME developers. The APIs that we're expressing, the facilities and services that we're providing have been well received, and we'd really like those to be adopted. There's a process for adoption by GNOME, and we've proposed each of the pieces that we've put together. We've proposed them all, as part of that broad GNOME umbrella. And I'm confident that if we look forward a couple of years, that will in fact happen, and people will feel like, we've stretched and energized GNOME as a platform. Accessibility is one of our core values both as a project and as a company, and yet it's probably the weakest aspect of Unity today. So before we made the commitment, which was only last week, before we decided that Unity was the right thing for us as a common interface, we had to look very closely at that, and the very firm statement was made that we shouldn't be making that commitment unless we also make the commitment to make it completely accessible. So we will be applying a fairly substantial amount of resources to get that done, and our absolute commitment is that Unity be completely accessible. That wasn't an initial requirement when we went out with Unity, which was designed in the context of netbook OEM deals, but it is a requirement if we want Unity to be a platform that millions of people use as part of the Ubuntu project.
Another exciting point to this UDS is I see that Linaro is here at UDS, and ARM was a hot topic during the Maverick cycle. Looks like it's going to be a hot topic again this cycle, but under that Linaro umbrella. Can you tell people a little bit more about Linaro?
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation. It was kind of ARM, and now it's matured into Linaro. And Linaro is a forum for collaboration between many participants in essentially the consumer electronics and device space, largely the ARM licensees, the ARM ecosystem, but increasingly, the talk is about Linaro as a forum. It's a place where developers come together to get stuff done around the kernel, to get stuff done around the tool chain, to get stuff done around graphics and sound APIs, to get stuff done around power management. That's kind of upstream type work. It's aligning the efforts of multiple players so that they get what they want faster, and they get it in a way which is more compatible across the ecosystem. Because we're working very closely with them, it's also essentially like a base platform. So folks will take what is essentially an Ubuntu core, but without the Ubuntu branding, and they'll be able to bring up boards from all of these players with that base platform, and so that's popular with developers. That it's royalty free, so it's well received, and we're now starting to see other companies that provide sort of services in competition with Canonical coming into that forum as well, which I think is a very healthy step and something that we would encourage. Ubuntu has a out-of-the-box cloud experience which is based around Eucalyptus, and that's our default cloud experience or cloud infrastructure. But just like we have GNOME Shell in the archives, just like we have LFC in the archives, just like we have Fluxbox and a bunch of other sort of window managers and so on, the Ubuntu archives are going to have multiple different ways to achieve a particular goal, and the OpenStack guys wanted people who use Ubuntu to be able to get OpenStack. So we're delighted to have them here. Turns out quite a few of them, used to work at Canonical, and so they know how this gig runs, and they know how to run sessions very effectively. So they'll get what they want, I think, because they know how to work the system, which is great. That's how it should be. Our default cloud out-of-the-box experience in 11.04 will still be Eucalyptus, but I'm delighted that OpenStack will be there. People will be able to, experiment, test and contrast the two environments, and ultimately that gives us a good, healthy, open source ecosystem where people have a choice of platforms. Well, for me, the ARM ecosystem actually coming into the commercial world in a retail-friendly way is very interesting. So I don't know if you've seen the very little netbooks that are so incredibly light, and have unbelievable battery times. To have those devices now, on retail shelves is a real sort of seismic shift, and I think that's going to be, one of the things that energizes people most during this next 6 months. Our focus is Linux in a consumer environment and in a desktop environment, and it's now quite clear that touch and gestures are going to be part of the people's expectations of a fully functional interface. But there was no really rigorous directed project to produce a gesture capability, and so we spun one up. The guys have done really good work. We seem to have good engagements now with the various hardware companies that are enabling touch on Linux, and we also seem to have good engagements with the guys at GTK and Qt, which are the sort of key toolkits. So all in all, I think it's a nice contribution. I hope other people adopt it, and we'll keep investing in it.